Okay, welcome everyone to our next session of the Agile Insights conversation. Today, I'm honored again after I was able to host him last year. Roger Martin is joining us again. For those of you who don't know Roger, Roger is the author of many books. That's the way I got to know him. Of course, he's done a ton of other interesting stuff in his life, and he can tell us more about that a bit later. But he wrote Playing to Win, which was one of the maybe most defining books on strategy in general, where he also laid out his framework for creating strategy, and we will deep dive into this today. Last year, I spoke to him about his book, When More Is Not Better. And this book was really interesting because it also, especially for those of you working in agile ways of working, he laid out the mechanistic view or the view of on the economy and on organizations as a machine, and and thought about like we need to look at organizations differently because they're living organisms, and there's a lot of insights in that book. And I think, Roger, if I'm not mistaken, if I did my homework right, this year you're publishing a new book, and it's called A New Way to Think, which
That is
I'm
correct.
really curious to read about later, and maybe you can give us a bit of thoughts around that throughout this conversation. But before we get this conversation going, I introduced you as the author of these three books. Maybe you can share with our audience a bit more about yourself and what you've done in the past, especially connected to the topic of strategy, which we will deep dive in today.
Sure. Well, um, I guess I got interested in strategy right from the time I was at business school, and I happened to go to business school at Harvard at the time. Mike Porter was friend and colleague was publishing competitive strategy, and he became a superstar for doing that. But he always wanted to be an academic first and foremost. And so when companies called him up and say, "Mike, I read your book, and I'd like to do this competitive strategy stuff," uh, he didn't really have capacity for it. And so we assembled this group around him that we could just essentially deal with the demand for his new way of thinking about strategy. So we built a firm called Monitor Company, which I did for a decade and a half with a bunch of colleagues. And then I got talked into being the dean of the business school in my home country. You can tell by my Canadian accent that I am a Canadian born. And the president of University of Toronto convinced me that I should give up my high-paying job in Boston, come back to Toronto, and run the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto. So I did that for 15 years. But I continued working on and writing about strategy, including Playing to Win, which was written during that period that I was a dean, and right toward the end of the period I was dean, 2013, and I retired from academia a couple of years ago and do the two things I love most, which is write and advise senior executives on strategy. So that's a thumbnail sketch of me. So I am a strategy geek. I love strategy, and I love writing about it. I try to take a little bit more holistic a view of it, and that's why When More Is Not Better is not a strategy book. But it's a book that relates to how one needs to think about strategy, I think, to be effective. But it also applied it to the economy as in general.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was reading When More Is Not Better, I absolutely saw the link to strategy, especially when you think about strategy also needing to consider for responsibility that we as organizations and as individuals have, and bringing this into our thinking, because in the past everything was about more and bigger and right, but you can also differentiate, and we will talk about strategy more today. And
Yeah,
differentiation is one key aspect of this, when you don't aim for more, but when
yeah,
you aim for better in different ways. So I
absolutely.
considered When More Is Not Better also as a strategy book, especially for CEOs in that case.
Yeah.
Now,
But
you
if I can
mentioned
just
that.
say it, if I can just say,
Yes.
I would hope one of the takeaways from When More Not Better is to think about sustainability in a holistic way. Is
Yeah.
what we're doing sustainable? Now, obviously, environmental sustainability is a super important piece of that, but it's not the only element of sustainability. And and for what it's worth, I mean, I think one of the things that I find attractive about Agile is, I think, embedded in Agile is a sense of sustainability, right? So
Yes.
if we're about being at war with our clients and talking about contracting so that we can get a favorable deal with client, that doesn't create a sustainable relationship with client. And if you make people work in a way that creates all sorts of useless rework, that's not sustainable either. So again, an increasingly a thrust of mine is to say, how can you think holistically about what you're doing in a way that you can keep doing it for the benefit of all the players in the system, rather than, some people would say, strategy is about, kind of, how do you get advantage and then put the pedal to the metal and take the greatest amount of advantage for you of whatever advantage it is. And that's, in my view, not
Yeah.
sustainable. And I'm seeing companies that I think are making themselves not sustainable these days by not thinking holistically about, is this working for everyone?
Absolutely. So taking a full stakeholder perspective and not only a shareholder perspective is just one example there.
Yep.
Now, you mentioned today you're doing the two things that you like most, which is
Yes.
writing and advising other people. As
Yes.
part of writing, just to put it out for everyone, every week Roger publishes an article on the topic of strategy. And one of those articles was about agile and playing to win, or agile and strategy development based on your own framework. And this is what I want to explore. And in our show notes, both on YouTube and later in a podcast, you will have like the links related to the articles that I referred to here. But if you're curious right now, just go to Google, type in Roger Martin and Medium. You will find his page, and all the articles are out there. It's really, really good. Now, before we talk about agile and strategy,
Hmm.
I want to get your perspective, Roger, on strategy in general, including like what are the some of the biggest myths out there and how you think about strategy, because that's from my experience going through like a lot of literature around this topic, working at Bain myself for 3 years. Your perspective is unique and different to what many organizations do and think about strategy.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little bit bearish on strategy these days. In fact, one of those Medium posts was the lost art of strategy. I really feel that it has become a lost art, and it's been replaced by a very bureaucratic, technocratic thing called strategic planning. And so I'm
Yes.
a lifelong strategy guy. I love strategy, but I generally hate strategic planning. Why? It's because strategy has become an exercise of defining a bunch of initiatives. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to build a factory. We're going to expand this. We're going to hire more people. Whatever. And that's the perception of strategy. And it's a very sort of technocratic view. It's sort of like, okay, Sohrab, you're the head of manufacturing. Here's what we're going to put in the strategic plan that'll make you happy. And Bill, you're the head of marketing. We're going to put this in the strategy, in the strategic plan. And people, what's our strat plan? And for me, to a great extent, it's a budget with pros, right? So budget's just our numbers, and then you add pros, and you call it a strat plan. My view is rather that strategy is about choice, right? It's about
Yes.
making a set of choices that are integrated together to position you on a playing field of your choice, the place on your playing field, in a way that you can deliver the most superior value equation in that space, which is what I think of as winning, right? And people will say, "Oh, well, we don't have time to do strategy," and I say, "Sorry, you can't not do strategy. What you do is your strategy, not what you say, right?" So in my experience, it is relatively rare that a company's strategy is similar to its strategic plan, right? Because its strategic plan will say, "Oh, we're going to be the best in our industry and the most innovative company," and blah 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 blah. And then they're not spending anything on R&D. They're not listening to their customers and whatever. That's their strategy, right? The strategy of many organizations is to punish customers as much as they can punish them without them leaving, right? Because they're making a set of
Exhausting the
choices
customer.
like, you want to return those goods? Oh, wow, we're going to make that super hard for you. That's their strategy. Because whatever the customer feels, that is what the company is doing. And so what I try to do when I'm advising people is to say, let's reverse engineer what our strategy is today. Like, what must it be today that caused us to do the things we're currently doing, right? And then how can we migrate that to one that is, kind of better, more competitively sustainable, and that that journey of making choices, making a real set of choices where you can write down the choices and say, these are the choices that we are making by our actions. That is what strategy is.
That is what strategy is. What you do, not what you say or what you put on a poster. In in many cases. Now you mentioned, Roger, that for a lot of organizations, and I see this today maybe more than it was in the past. You've
Hmm.
been around a bit longer, and maybe you saw that already in the past.
Yeah.
But due to the fast pace of change, a lot of organizations, be it startups, being organizations in high growth industries, and I know I read your post today about high growth industries, which
Yes.
is always like just a temporary thing, not a
Yes.
permanent thing, right?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
also people in larger organizations, they usually, or not usually, but many of them don't take the time to really think through a strategy. And either they don't develop a good strategy or they have someone else develop it for them, right? The
Yes.
monitors, the McKinseys, the BCGs, and the Bains in the world.
Yep.
Now, if an executive comes to you, or if you're in a conversation with one and they say, "No, no, I don't have time to do this," what is your response to that?
My response is no. No, you are doing it. And they're like, "What do you mean?" I said, "You're. I believe that you're the CEO and that's chief executive officer. That means a whole lot of choices come to you, and you make those choices. Am I not correct?" And they were like, "Yeah, but that's not strategy." And I say, "No, no, it is. It's deciding what to do and what not to do. And last time I checked, you can't decide to do everything. You have to say yes to some things and no to some other things. So if you want," I said, "I can just sit in your office for a week watching you, and then I'll tell you what your strategy is. So you have one." So the only question for you, CEO, the only question for you is, how thoughtful do you want to be about those decisions? And if you want to make each one of them kind of on their own as if they were sort of independent from the others, I mean, you can do that. In my experience, that doesn't make for great results. It means a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and somebody else is figuring out exactly how they want to beat you. So my suggestion is that we think about what those choices have produced for you. That's a gap between what you wish for, right, and what is actually happening. Let's just identify that. What about where we're landing now, right? Our relationship with our customers, is it growing or is it shrinking? How we're doing against competitors? Is our profitability lower or higher? Whatever problem we've got now, which is a gap between results and aspirations, why don't we dive on that and ask, could we make a set of choices that would make that problem go away? So, in some sense, I think people have this notion of what is strategy? Oh, it's getting everybody together for all sorts of long meetings in order to come up with a strat plan, right? And they say, I don't have time to add all those activities into my day. Plus, it's not very useful, which is true. So I say, no, no, strategy is just it's a problem solving technique. You tell me your biggest problem that you're going to work on anyway. That is going to be solved by making a different set of choices. because you don't want to be insane, right? Insanity is doing the same thing and assuming that the results are going to be different. So if we don't want to be insane,
Exactly.
we need to make a different set of choices, and let's work on that. And so, in some sense, that turns strategy from something where here's my daily job. Ooh, and I've got to go over there and do strategy to come back to my daily job. It's no, this is your daily job, and we're going to do your daily job in a way that results in something that is more positive and productive and hopefully makes the problem that you've identified go away.
Yeah.
So that's
So
how I deal with this
yeah.
I don't have time for strategy kind of
I don't
thing.
have time for strategy. Yeah, I mean, looking at this, to be very honest, as the CEO of a small company, I, I'm constantly in this battle. Right? How much
Yeah.
time do I spend on actively doing strategy? And if I don't spend that time, we're still doing strategy. It's just
Yes.
maybe not that conscious, right? And maybe we're
Yes.
not identifying that key challenge, and maybe we're not aligning all of our daily activities to address those key challenges. So
Yes.
when I go through your books, but also through your posts, which are super valuable, is like, okay, hey, I need to take a step back. I need to make that investment in time to ensure that my daily actions that I'm taking anyway, but that I make better choices on a daily basis to achieve the aspiration that we set out to achieve as an organization.
Yep.
So, in addition to what you've already mentioned, right, the where to play and the how to win, prior to that, this aspiration is also important. And
Yep.
I remember you wrote one post where you talk about transformations, and I want to go into that a bit later in this
Okay.
conversation. But where you emphasize on the importance of that aspiration, how meaningful it is to have a true aspiration, not one of those lofty ones, but one that is tangible and that is achievable in the midterm, right? And then align everything that you do on a daily basis towards that. So there is no disconnect between strategic work and our daily operations. No, our daily operations are strategic work. That's at least what I take. Am I
Yeah,
interpreting too much, or?
no. You're a very good kind of reader and student, Saurabh. So absolutely right. Um, and I would just add to what you said. That's why I think it's really important to toggle back and forth between your aspiration and your where to play, how to win choice. Because
Exactly.
again, many aspirations, as you alluded to, Saurabh, aren't helpful to the organization at all because they're unrealistic. It's like, well, we're going to be the best company, the most innovative company in the industry. Well, uh, I'm from Canada and originally, and practiced, kind of consulting in Canada for a while because I opened a monitor office in Toronto. And so many Canadian companies that were national, not global, would say, well, we're going to be the most innovative company in our industry. So, okay, so Canada's population 33 million, and you only sell in Canada. How is it that you're going to fund R&D that would match one of your US competitors who's a home market of 330 million, or some European EU competitor that's got a market of 500 million people? That's just made up. You're not going to be the most innovative. You could, if you decided to serve the world, but you haven't. And so your where to play is utterly inconsistent with your aspiration.
Your
So you
aspiration.
sort of have to
Yeah.
toggle back. I say start. I say don't start with an offsite to wordsmith your vision, mission, aspiration, but start out and say what would we love to become. Let's table that for a minute, and then ask: is there a where to play, how to win that is doable for us, hard, but doable for us, that would make that aspiration come true? And if the answer is no, then try another aspiration, right? It's this back and forth. And that's one thing that, again, the technocrats who dominate strategy are far too linear. It's like, have an offsite, decide the aspiration. Check, we've done that. Now go and think about where we're going to play. Okay, check, go that. Now how can we win there? And all that does is create constraints along the way that make it ever less likely that you're going to be able to come up with something matching that works. And so I'm much more into sort of this. You've got to circulate around and be more iterative in your strategy. Think about an aspiration, see if there's a where to play, how to win that works there. revisit the aspiration. Okay, I think we've got a word to play, how to win. Then, kind of the last two boxes, capabilities and management systems. Can we really build the capabilities that are necessary to win there? And if we can't, then we say, well, how could we modify the how to win? What does that mean for the where to play? What does that mean for the aspiration? And just go back and forth. And a lot of people just say, oh, that's failure. You have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 along the thing. It's not. Strategy, again, the key thing about strategy is it's a holistic set of choices. It's not a strat plan where you've got a list of choices that don't relate to one another and don't add up. You have to have a set of choices that work together.
Yeah. And what I always liked, so you referred to this back and forth, right? This iterative approach. I always also looked at those things as feedback loops.
Yes.
So when you have this aspiration, now you decide on where to play, you decide on how to win, and so on and so forth. And maybe you make a decision, but based on that decision, you move into action. So you might decide to run some experiments to assess whether that where to play is applicable and
Yes.
whether the how to win is actually a winning strategy. All right.
Yes.
And when you realize that it's not, you circle back and you reassess the where to play. You reassess your big aspiration. And based on this, for me, this in itself is very well aligned with what we refer to an incremental and iterative approach to product development, particularly,
Absolutely.
but also organizational development in the agile space.
Yes.
Now, when we think about agility, what I see happen a lot is that organizations say, wow, everything's moving so fast, we cannot make a longer term decision on strategy, etc. Now, I would be interested in two things. One is when you think about longer term or midterm and for a strategy, what is the time frame that you usually look at? And that might be different from industry to industry. And I would be interested in your perspective on this. And the second thing is getting into the core about how do you connect your playing to win framework with agility, with the key
Mhm.
principles, not a specific framework like Scrum, but with the key principles and values in agile ways of working.
Sure. Sure. Well, on the first question of how long, and people saying, well, things are moving so fast, I can't make long term decisions. One, that's just factually not true, right? Lots of the decisions companies make are long term decisions, whether they know it at the time or not, right? If right, if they decide to install SAP as their ERP instead of Salesforce, they go for
It's a
a
long
kind of a
term
licensed
decision.
product. That's a long-term decision, right? Right. That's a
Yes.
decision for like 10, wouldn't you say probably 10 years minimum. They're not going to rip out
Yeah.
SAP or rip out Salesforce after having installed it. So one message I'd say to me: just don't fool yourself into thinking somehow the decisions you're making do not have a long-term kind of impact. And so, so recognize that. But to the extent that your world is, you think of it as VUCA, it's volatile, uncertain, complex, whatever, ambiguous. You you need to think about how modifiable is this strategy, right? Is this a choice that we're making that is going to last 10 years, whether we like it or not, right? Or could we make that choice in a way that leaves us optionality to iterate, get feedback, and modify it? And so I think that's a part of good strategy practice, right? Is having that sense of how have I left myself the ability to iterate, or have I boxed myself in? That having been said, right, I would argue that all good strategies make bets. They do box
Yeah.
you in. They do say we're going to do this, not that, right? When Salesforce
Because that's
got
the
going in
definition of
again,
a choice.
and said we are not going to sell licenses, that boxed them in, right? If you can't make the benefit of software as a service profoundly manifested for clients, not you, doesn't matter what you think, it's what the clients think, then you've made a choice that is going to be a terrible choice for you, right? And so you do make choices, and that was a fast moving industry too. SaaS is not sort of some stable industry, so you've got to make those choices. But think about what ones do you have to make that are irreversible, and try to make those in a way that's consistent with your environment. And so, what in terms of time frame, you asked specifically about time frame, and then you alluded to maybe it's different by industry. Yes, you I believe are correct. And sort of the fundamental way I think about strategy and time is that you have to have a strategy that will last long enough, and serve you long enough to pay back on the irreversible assets you put in place, right? So if you're building a copper mine, right, from scratch, chances are you won't get copper out of that mine for at least 20
For a long
years.
time.
Yes, from the time you say we're going to build it, because you got to go and negotiate with it, because they're mainly in kind of Latin American and Asian countries. So you got to go and negotiate them. You often have to build all sorts of infrastructure, etc. And if you're lucky, maybe 15 years later, but probably more like 20 years later, you'll get copper. Well, whether the world is VUCA or not, you're going to have to invest billions and billions of dollars, maybe 10-ish billion dollars, at least five, probably more like $10 billion, to have copper 20 years from now to 50 years, from 20 to 50 years from now. Well, you have to have a belief, right, that regardless of the cycles of the copper price, the cost position of that mine, once it's built the way you want it to be built, it will be robust for any reasonable range of copper prices out 20 to 50 years from now. So if you build a copper mine that's at the highest end of the cost curve, chances are that's a bad strategy, because if copper prices are toward the low end for any period of time, you'll be out of business. If that copper mine perhaps is the lowest cost kind of mine in the world when it comes online, and you kind of know what the cost position of all the mines are right now, and nobody else can build one in less than 20 years, then if copper prices are attractive, then you'll make an unbelievable amount of money. If copper prices are not attractive, you'll still make some money, because somebody else is the marginal cost producer setting the marginal price, right? So but that's very different than starting up an internet business, where you write some code, get out there, and your assets. If you make a 5 years of return on those assets before your competitive advantage goes away, then you'll be happy, and you'll have earned a good return on it. So it kind of depends on how long your advantage has to last to pay for the investments, the irreversible investments that you need to make to deliver that, if you will, that where to play, how to win strategy.
Yeah. So you always have to look at the barriers of entry
Mm-hmm.
for others, and what
Yep.
kind of moats you basically can create in your specific industry.
Yep.
Now, thank you for that. Now, taking this to the way that organizations want to work in the future,
Yes.
being more agile, right? And
Yes.
saying, all right, and even if they admit we're already making longer term decisions, like
Yeah.
installing or getting SAP or Salesforce or whatever, or maybe even deciding to build a certain product in a certain market, that's also a
Yep.
longer term
That's a longer term
strategic
job.
decision, right?
Yep.
But how can they make this, or maybe it's not even building a bridge between these two, because the way you frame strategy creation and execution is so close to agile ways of working. But what are the biggest gaps that you perceive people have in their minds, in their heads, when they think about, on the one hand, building a strategy, and on the other hand, executing in an agile manner?
Sure. Well, I think the reason that it feels to you as though there's not some big gap between my view of strategy and the agile view of the world is I would argue that both my view of strategy and the development of agile were essentially anti-technocratic movements, right? Right. So at least now you're the expert on agile. I am not. But here's my reading of agile is it was a reaction to increasing technocracy in software development. Now I know it's broader now, but it sort of arose out of software development, which is waterfall. You can sort of plan this stuff all out. You can figure up upfront exactly what's going to happen and figure exactly how to contract with the customer, and then the customer goes bye bye, and you just follow that technocratic plan, right? I think,
Exactly.
and agile at least feels to me from reading it as a revolt against technocracy, and to say no, 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 it's this more organic thing. You've got to iterate more. How you treat the customer during the process is super important to an outcome. If you tell them to go bye bye, and we'll come back with the finished software, bad, just bad things are going to happen. Except, but all of those to me are is sort of a technocratic view of the world, and that's in some sense what my view of strategy is a revolt against. It's like, no, you don't say to a customer, oh, you want a strategy? Okay, great. Thanks, Rob. I will see you in 6 months, and I will deliver on a plate your strategy. And to do that, I have to engage in all these meetings where I meet with everybody and agree on here are going to rank the initiatives and come up with the 10 initiatives and et cetera. And then we'll be done. And there's no iteration. It's like you start from here. You say, let's get everybody together around a table. Let's see what Sohrab in manufacturing wants. Let's see what Bill in marketing wants. Let's see what Reshmi wants in supply chain. Then we'll put them up on the board and we'll rank all of them and fight about them and come out with the list of the 10 things we're going to do. And then we're done with strategy. Very sort of technocratic approach. So I guess
And
I
don't
think
forget the budget.
and right, then convert it into the budget and then get buy-in, right? Tell everybody that this is great and they should agree with all of it. So that's why I think it feels to you, an agile guy, right, as what's the big difference. I'm not there's such an attitudinal similarity. I mean, like, I guess I think agile is generally, it started out in the world of how do you develop software. It's now obviously much more broad, so it had a different purpose. Mine is, how do you make those decisions about what the company does and does not do. So they're in essence about somewhat different stuff, but the mindset behind them is nearly identical,
Very
I guess,
similar.
is my view.
Is very similar, and I like how you put this, right? That the agile movement is some kind of a revolt against that technocracy, right?
Yeah.
And in When More Is Not Better, you talk about this mechanistic view on the economy and on organizations, where you basically can determine, like, if I do this, exactly this will happen, and it
Yeah.
rarely ever does because things are so much more complex.
Yeah.
And I think in the development of software, it is, and it was certainly very similar, and that's why this movement happened. Now, what I see happening
And can I
in
just
the yes, of course,
but sorry to interrupt, Sarab, but the revolt to me, like, and in When More Is Not Better. I mean, I'm an economist by original training, so I always can say I can beat up on economists because I'm not beating up on somebody else. I'm beating up on me. There there is such an arrogance to me, right, in this technocratic approach. And I talk about a great economist, Nobel-winning economist called Leontiev, a Russian who came to America. But and part of it is naivete as well. But he got the Nobel Prize for the notion of input-output models. He could take the U.S. economy, break it into 500 sectors, and say, here are the inputs into this, and here are the outputs into others, and have this sort of model for the U.S. economy that could say, I now know how this works. To me, that's sort of a level of arrogance that I could never sort of presume, that you can figure out how this incredibly complex adaptive system is going to work and write equations about it. I just can't. I just can't make myself be that arrogant. Now, sometimes people sort of say, Roger, like there is some inherent arrogance in your model. You're saying we're going to make choices in this uncertain world, right? And so you're saying that you can be absolutely right, but that's a misunderstanding of what I'm saying. I'm saying you're going to make choices, right? You can't not make choices, and a bunch of them are
Exactly.
going to be
Even not making
wrong.
a choice is
Yeah,
a choice.
not making a choice is a choice, and what you say, or what you end up doing might be wrong, and you have to take that into account, right? But it's better to
Absolutely.
make a choice consciously and say, this is what would have to be true. As I say, what would have to be true? This is what would have to be true for this to be a good choice. And then watch and adjust if the things that would have to be true aren't being as true as you wish they were. Then adjust and adjust and adjust and adjust, which again is, I think, consistent with agile, which is like
Absolutely.
you just have to keep adjusting. And I think people who are technocratically inclined and have never done that before find it scary and worrisome and painful. But I think, again, you're the agile expert, but I think in the world of strategy, if I've convinced somebody that it's making bets, all you can do is shorten your odds of success rather than from 10 to 1. If you got 7 to 4, that's better. And don't worry about needing to adjust. That's what happens. Then they get quite comfortable with it, right? It's sort of a mindset thing. If they think that that's an error, then they're uncomfortable and don't want to ever admit error. If they instead say, this is going to happen, then it's just no big deal. And I assume that when you're kind of doing software development in an agile fashion, when the customer comes back and says, well, I know that's sort of what we said we want, but now that we see it, we'd like it to be a little bit different. The agile person, I think, you correct me if I'm wrong, the agile person is not saying, oh my God, this is a disaster. We got to go back to square one. They're like, I believe life has just unfolded as life is wont to do in the world. I think, right? Is that,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Exactly. You expect the changes. So when I'm teaching agile ways of working to organizations that believe in the waterfall system, one of the questions that I ask them is, how often, if you look at a longer term project or product in development initiative, how often do you get change requests?
yeah,
And they always say, oh, we get change requests all the time.
yeah,
And then I ask them, so those change requests that come in, do they disrupt the plan that you've made? Obviously, they disrupt the plan that we made. I'm like, yes. So when you have that defined approach to work, right? Defined process control, that's the term that we use. You are not expecting changes to come. So every change that comes disrupts your plan.
yeah. It's
Whereas
a
when you're
bad thing.
working in an agile manner, right? If you believe in empiricism and empirical process control, you're expecting those changes.
Yeah,
So whenever they come, you can embrace them, right? And
yes,
you're already planning for them to come. You don't know what the change will be,
right.
but you know there will be a change
Yeah,
request
yeah,
because you already. And that's I like the point that you brought up about some people being very arrogant when being like predicting the future. You are admitting to yourself, I cannot predict the future, and
yeah,
because I cannot, it's not about spending more time and doing more detailed analysis because then I'm trapped in analysis paralysis. That's also a choice. Right? It's a choice of not moving forward. But it's about, okay, with the information that I have and with the logic that I can put into play, I'll make a choice, but I'll put in the feedback loops to evaluate whether my choice was a good one or not so good. And then I move back and make a better choice. And if needed, I'll move back again and I make a better choice. Because now, based on the actions that I'm taking, I'm getting more and more information instead of just sitting there and trying to like get a lot of information without acting and then hopefully coming up with a better decision. So that's, I think, very much aligned with what you put in there. And I read one of your articles. It was about also, let me quickly just finish this,
Yes,
about
yes,
one
yes,
of the fallacies that people have in their heads when it's about analysis, and that they
yes,
don't see that there's two types of analysis. One is the like the time taking, cost intensive, like market evaluation and all of that that you can do. The other is the logical thinking.
yes,
So, really sitting there thinking through your current business and your future business in a logical manner. And based on that logic, it can be false, but making decisions and then
yes,
evaluating them. So, I love this piece because I think a lot of people in the agile space, they move too much with the pendulum on the other side. And they're like, no, we can't decide anything. We just have to do. But that's also making a decision. And
yes,
you're not taking the time for that logic
yes.
in your hand, on the paper, whatever.
No, I love the point, Sarab, and yes, what I say about analysis is we often think about analysis as a thing. I like to divide it into two things. It's a logical structure to which you apply data. That's what analysis is. So, for instance, a logical structure might say, well, bigger factories are lower cost because you can spread the fixed cost across each unit of production. That's a logical structure. There's a if-then belief embedded in that. Now, if you wanted to have analysis, you would then add data. You'd go and look at 100 plants of varying size and say, oh, are the costs really lower in the bigger plants or not? That's analysis. And what I say, as you said, there is, in my view, never, ever, under any circumstances, an excuse not to have logic behind your choice. But there are many
Absolutely.
excuses not to have lots of analysis. In fact, virtually every entrepreneur that you'll meet, successful entrepreneur you'll meet, had very little analysis. They had a logical structure, and they said, "All the established players aren't going to do this, but I'm going to do it." And of course, most of them are told, "You're a moron. You're going to go out of business," right? And then they just go do it. And in some sense, they produce the data that actually supports the fact that their logic was good over time. And so I think always having logic behind your choices is key, and depending on your situation. Like if you're a giant publicly traded company with shareholders and a board of directors, you can't do what the entrepreneur does and say, we're going to spend $2 billion because I think it's a good idea. They're going to ask for more analysis, which is more data. Now that's going to slow them down and make them more conservative, which is one of the reasons why they're getting disrupted. The big companies are getting disrupted by little guys and gals in garages who just say, "Here's my logic. I'm gonna go on the basis of that." So just as you said, you can have this balance in Agile of not even thinking about it. Let's just do. There's the same sort of thing in the world of business and the world of strategy in general, which is having a intelligent, balanced view of how much data can we have, do we have, and how much do we want to connect based on our situation. And what I try to tell all my clients, which tend to be larger companies, like I deal with two kinds of companies. All of my investing is I don't invest in public stocks,
Smaller ones.
partially because it's tiny startups. So I deal a bunch with tiny startups and a bunch with really big companies, Dow Jones 30 size companies, and the tiny companies, I say, I'm not going to invest in you unless you can give me the logic. Uh, and they're typically kind of blown away because they'll show me their financial spreadsheets, and I typically don't even look at them but before making, like, because I say that's all made up. That's about the future. Who the hell knows? What is your where to play, how to win? And I invest 100% on that. But I'm super tough on the logic. Like, if they can't explain the logic, the where to play, how to win logic, then there's no chance, no matter what their financial projections look like, no matter how many successes they've had before, no matter if whatever Greylock or whoever is, as some other VC is in it, you cannot. I'm inconsolable. You cannot do anything for me. But then when I'm talking to the big companies, I say there just are waves of these little people in garages who are taking aim at you and are going to disrupt you. So if you insist on everything being proven in advance, that's a recipe for you not doing anything. And so it's a balance that you have to strike between how much data and analytics you need to feel comfortable. And if you say we need comprehensive proof, they're going to get you. They are going to get you. If you say, well, we need some inklings of that because we have to be kind of responsible, I'll say, okay, then you've got a shot of keeping those people from eating your lunch.
Absolutely. There's a great quote that just came up in my mind from, I think it's attributed to Steve Jobs. And most organizations say, I have to see it to believe it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I need to see the data so that I believe there's an opportunity in this space. Now, who would have thought you can sell books online before Jeff Bezos did it, right?
Yeah.
But Steve Jobs says, when it comes to innovation, you need to believe it so that it becomes seeable.
Yes.
Right? And that's, I think, the point. Right? And belief is not only like your gut feeling or your instinct, it's the logic behind it, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
before it is seen to anybody out there, you have to make a decision based on that logic that you say, all right, we are going to build this. We're
Yes.
going to build this product. We're going to make this business model. We're more, like the logistic, everything around it. We are going to make this, of course, in small and incremental steps, but ultimately you're acting primarily in the field of innovation. If you don't want to be the second or third or fourth mover in that field, you have to primarily act on the logic piece. And
Yes.
yes, you can then feed it with information that you get along the way. That's, I think, how
No,
a
I
lot of
think
these things
you're
work.
absolutely right. And if we then dive into that, Saurabh, because a natural question from that is, well, where did that logic come from, right?
Yeah.
And what I would
Where does it
argue,
come from?
yeah. What I would argue is that it comes from to a great extent analogy, right? Seeing something one place and saying, ooh, I could apply that in this other place. Um, and it comes from also just snippets, right? Non-comprehensive data, right? Steve Jobs famously, he was into calligraphy, right? And he, I mean, basically said, well, people are attracted to this. We've had calligraphy for forever, and people really value when they get a wedding invitation that was hand calligraphed, if you will, that makes them happy, right? What does that have to do with what a computer screen looks like? You could say nothing, right? Because that's a completely different situation. Or you could say,
Everything.
no, I'm going to have as a thing in my head, what you see is what you get, right? It's going to look the way I want it to look, and I'm going to care a whole lot
Mm.
about that. Right? Is that comprehensive data analytics? No, but it's taking a snippet from here and saying, I think it works there. It's like the iMac, right? The colors that Johnny Ive chose for the iMac, that tangerine and the
Yeah.
lime and the grape color. Where the hell did that come from? Uh, the answer is it didn't
I
come out
still
of.
wonder.
Yeah, well, it came out of Johnny Ive having noticed 30 years earlier a camera company called Savoie coming out with a line of cameras, little 35 mil cameras in a set of these wild colors, and the logic for Johnny Ive was, you know, cameras kind of interesting. They were all black or dark brown, right? And this company came up with this sort of frame breaking look of a camera. Um, Computers, they're all sort of beige, gray beige, monotonous kind of colors. Could we do that over here? And what choices did he make on colors? The exact precise Pantones of the cameras,
Of the cameras,
right?
yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that you have to, and I would argue how you have to develop if you want to innovate, is this ability to see things and see how in a different context some of the same rules would apply. So for Steve Jobs, the rules that apply to calligraphy in the kind of in designed kind of works of art would apply on a computer screen, and that's how I think you need to develop your capacity for innovation, to say, what are some rules about how I think human beings behave that I could twist in a new way and have a new application. So it's not, to me,
When
random at all, and it's not deterministic either in a technocratic way, right? Johnny Ive could have been wrong. The computers are so
Absolutely.
different from cameras that people are going to say, I hate this. But they didn't. They said, this is so cool. This is so cool.
This is so cool.
And
So instead
and
of
Steve
looking
Jobs,
at data,
people say
yeah,
Steve Jobs, the first thing Steve Jobs did when he got back was to develop the iMac. Steve Jobs himself rebuts that completely. He said, "No, when I got back, I went to see Johnny Ive and say, what's cooking?" Saw the models of the iMac in his office and said, "What the hell is that?" And he explained it, and apparently, or maybe apocryphal story, but apparently Steve Jobs said, "Production." Right, that was how long it took him to decide they were going to put that into production as one of the first signature pieces in essentially the new Apple. So, in my view, Steve Jobs had this great kind of logical processor that said, here's how I think about customers, how they think about it. Here's how I think about technology, whatever that fits, or that doesn't fit, because he killed a whole bunch of things too. That doesn't fit
yes,
at all, but that one fits, because I apparently asked, why aren't we producing that? He said, well, your predecessor is not sure that this is. I mean, this maybe could be too radical. Blah blah blah. No, boom, boom, done. We're done here.
that's the decision that he made. So what I'm hearing from this is, instead of just aiming to get like tons and tons of data, you can also look at patterns,
Yes.
right? And you refer to them as rules of human behavior, etc. Now you can look at those patterns, and based on the patterns that you see in similar industries, or sometimes even very different industries,
Yeah.
come to strategic choices and then actions for your own organization. Now, with regards to time, I'd like to talk about two more topics. One I think
Yeah.
is smaller, and the other one is a bit bigger. The
Sure.
smaller one is, you also wrote an article about strategy and OKRs,
Yes.
and that we shouldn't take OKRs. And I'm bringing this up because OKRs, a lot of organizations currently say, oh, we're agile, we're doing OKRs. Okay, we can discuss about that, but at least it falls under the agile umbrella from my definition. So,
Yeah.
and you talk about that OKRs and strategy are not the same thing.
Yes.
But before I basically rephrase what you wrote in your column or in your article there, I'd like to give you the time and space to share a bit of
Sure.
your thoughts on OKRs and strategy, and where they're different, but also how they connect to each other.
Sure, sure. And interesting enough, Saurabh, that is my most viewed post in the whole 73 post series, and
Oh, I
by
didn't
far.
know that.
And yeah,
Okay.
so I mean, it just blew up when it went out. So my the article, as most of these Medium pieces are reactions to things that I see going on in the customers that I do strategy with, and what I observed is this pattern of setting OKRs, and somehow assuming because you've set them, it will happen. Right? I mean, literally, that's the thing that will cause the thing you would like to have happen be more likely to happen, and it simply doesn't. So I just observe it. I'm thinking, well, we did this, we set all our OKRs, and then people just didn't execute, right? And the reason for me is that yes, you can set goals, like the whole process of saying what are we trying to accomplish, and how are we going to measure that. This is all good, but you have to have logic behind why on earth you would believe that you're going to accomplish those things. And the only way you're going to accomplish your objectives is to have a where to play, how to win that is consistent with it, right? If I call objective is sort of a form of a winning aspiration, all right, that winning aspiration has to be twinned with a where to play, how to win that is doable, sensible, or it doesn't matter a whit that you set that out. It isn't going to happen. And I think Silicon Valley is like, crazy about OKRs, and all that it's going to produce is more of this notion that we have the OKRs, we have them all set up, and people just aren't executing. And so then you fire those people who aren't meeting their key
Key result.
indicators or key results, and say we got to get some other people who can get the key results that our objectives suggest, and then you fire them, and you fire them, and you fire them. It's like, you know, um, uh, it's just a broken system. And again, it's I mean, this does kind of lead into the book you referred to before, The New Way to Think, which is what I tend to do is ask the question: is a model that is in use now producing the results that you wish it produces, right? And if it doesn't, I'd rather have you, rather than saying, well, we'll fire those people and get some other people who will be able to achieve the key results that we need. Oops, and they couldn't either. And so we'll fire them and get some more, and then we'll fire them and get some more, and we'll fire them and get some more. No, the model in your head was OKRs make it more likely that we will achieve the key results. And if you don't achieve the key results consistently, I'd like you to ask the question, maybe there's something wrong with your model, your
Yeah.
OKR kind of model, and maybe there's a better model. And for me, the better model is key results can only be defined after you have a strategy that would make it actually possible for you to achieve those key results. So that's what I think of as a new way of think, right? And so actually OKRs as a system, right, is not incompatible with strategy. It's just necessary but not sufficient. It's not unlike
Yes.
you saying, if you take Agile kind of over the edge and say we can't even think about the logic of what we're doing, let's just do some stuff and hope it works out, right? The sort of bastardization of Agile. It's not going to work. It's not going to get the results that you want. And so what I find is that people fall in love with these models, and then they blame everything else other than the model, right? So in the OKR case, it's blame the people for not achieving the key results. We laid out the objectives. They were clear as a bell. We laid out the key results, clear as a bell. We deployed the key results and objectives to all the people. And then those lazy or dumb or kind of not focused or whatever people went and screwed up.
Incompetent.
Incompetent people and kind of screwed up our brilliant plans. And after that happens for long enough, I say, who's the idiot in this story? Those incompetent people, or you that is keeping this model sort of in this position of it's the truth. No, it ain't. It ain't even close to the truth.
It ain't even close. So, I mean, ultimately, the in the OKR model, if you follow it like a dogma, it becomes again the technocratic model,
Yes.
right? Because
Yes.
you basically say everything, we've determined everything, now just do it.
Yes.
Right? If you don't include those feedback loops, and I think in the article you also refer to like the objectives being very connected to the the big goal that you want to achieve, and you're
Hmm.
not very like you're not dogmatic when it comes to terminology, but
Yeah.
the where to play and the how to win are the two missing pieces if you
Yes.
think about OKRs, and that's how you could integrate those two things. Now, anyone who is interested more in that, obviously it was, or apparently it was the most
Yes.
read article that you wrote, so people can read up on this as well. Now, being conscious of time, final topic, and probably
Yes.
we're not going to cover it, but I still want to get your thoughts on this because a
Sure.
lot of my clients are struggling with the topic of transformation,
Hmm.
right? Being an agile transformation, digital transformation, whatever, XYZ transformation, they all struggle with this. And when I read your article on this, you mentioned 4 points that are incredibly important to consider when you think about a transformation. One is the clear strategy, and I'll give you time and space to elaborate on all of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Two is to be patient.
Yeah.
Three is to be resilient. And
Yeah.
number four is to have growth.
Yeah.
Now, can you briefly walk us through these four? And for me, the most important one probably would be the patience piece, because every client that I meet, they want to finish their agile transformation in 12 months. So
Yes.
maybe you have a few words on this, a few thoughts
Yes.
on this to share. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd love it if they could get it done faster than not, but it's just not been my experience. I mean, I guess I'm sort of into very much into logical coherence, Saurabh, which is if you're going to use the T word, right, the transformation word, right, it means something transformational. Otherwise, you wouldn't use that word. If you could say we're engaging in an improvement effort, right? Then I'd say, oh, okay, we're trying to make ourselves kind of a little bit
A
better.
little bit
I,
better.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't I wouldn't I wouldn't suggest resilience and patience kind of for that. I'd just say get on with it, and if you can get it done in 6 weeks, good for you. But if you're going to have the topic as transformation, i.e., the thing at the end of the process is going to be hardly recognizable as having any similarities with the thing at the start. So let's call that transformation. The idea that that's going to happen really fast is nonsensical. I mean, in fact, like I don't know. I can't point to a situation where I saw that happen kind of very very quickly. Right, I've been part of
Me
transformations.
neither.
I talked about it in the article on the board of Thomson Corporation, which became Thomson Reuters, and it was utterly transformational. And it only took about 20 years, right? 22-ish
Only,
years.
only.
Yeah. um, so why the patience? The patience is if the change is extremely dramatic, right? Then I've just never seen it happen quickly. That having been said, right, I would just say, you know, it's not a long dark tunnel, right? And I think again, this is something where my approach to strategy and agile are friendly. Like agile doesn't treat everything like a long dark tunnel where we're in this long dark tunnel until we deliver the final software to the customer and they're seeing it for the first time, right? That if you make something into a long dark tunnel, then people will obsess about how long this is taking and how long is that tunnel. Can I see the light at the end of it yet? If instead you say, we're trying to go from here to this completely different place, can we see progress on a consistent basis? And
Yes.
again, as I said in the article, that was my That was my approach at the Rotman School. It was unfortunately not a very good business school when I took it over in 1998, and that's not my assessment. That was the assessment of the president and the provost. They said, "We need you to come in and make this, a great business school." It isn't one now. It's, in fact, in some sense, it's a bit of an embarrassment to the University of Toronto compared to the law school, and the medical school, and the engineering school, all of which are fabulous. And this very important thing called a business school isn't. So I just set out. I set out to say, I want to absolutely transform this business school, but my goal is to have the change in any one year be so small that nobody's going to freak out and leave or freak out or push back or anything. But then when they look back after 15 years, they can't even remember what we were like 15 years ago. It'll be so far in the past. And that's what we did. We transformed it utterly. And that, I'm not just saying that, I was recognized as, I was at the last of my 15 years as dean, I was named the business school dean of the year. And the citation about why it's the most transformational dean of his era. So other people said it was transformational, but along the way, it was just little steps, little steps, little steps, little steps. And I didn't have to feel kind of badly about how long it took because we were getting better every year, right?
Yeah.
And and as I also said, our revenues in the last year were 10x in the first year. So we grew, and that's why growth is really important. It greases the wheels of transformation. I would never ever recommend a transformation for a non-growing entity. You're not going to do it. You'll fail because everybody that you have to take stuff from, resources from, to do the transformation will fight you every step of the way.
Yeah.
I didn't take anything from anybody. Now, there were people who weren't the happiest when they saw something else getting a gigantic infusion of resources. But since I wasn't taking theirs, they were not going to go to the barricades to fight it. They would mope a little bit, and I would have probably in that situation too. But that doesn't inspire you to throw wrenches into the gears to stop it from happening. So I don't know. There are people who will sort of say, "Well, Roger, you're not being aggressive enough when you say be patient." And I say, "Gee, I'm an aggressive guy. I transformed the things I'm involved with. I did it with Tennis Canada. I did it with Sick Kids. I did it with School Finance. Anything that I'm involved in, like I eat my own dog food. I do what I say on my own stuff. I just think they're technocrats. Like I don't speak kind of well in some sense to technocrats. The technocrat wants to say, no, I want to be at the end as soon as possible. And I think the playing to win / agile type of person, I think, is much more obsessed about, are we heading in a good direction, right? A sound direction. And are we making progress toward that? Right. I think those are the two questions I ask. I get the sense that those would be the two questions that an agile person would ask. Is this a sound direction? Because if it's a stupid direction, then getting there faster is no great thing. Is it a sound direction? And are we making progress? Are we acting in a fashion that makes progress? And I think the playing to win person and the agile person both say, I'm going to go to bed at night saying, if I do those two things every day, right, then this is all going to work out fine. And so they sleep soundly. They don't go to bed saying, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. And that's, I think, what the technocrat says. I want to be done. But what happens when you're done, right? You think you're going to be fine for all time because we're done? no, things are going to change, and you're going to have to kind of modify and adjust, right? Darwin didn't say it's a survival of the fittest at all. He said it's survival of the most adaptable, and so I think having the mindset that says we have to have a logic behind the direction we've set out on, and we have to have a way of working that makes progress in that direction. That's at its heart, and that's again why I think I just am not at odds with Agile, even though lots of people think, well, its strategy is at odds with it, and the reason they do is because strategy in the main is because strategy is dominated by technocrats and technocracy and technocratic procedures. And so I would say Agile people have a right to say we don't like much of strategy, but it doesn't. It absolutely does not have to be. And I think I'm trying to fight a battle to make sure that it isn't completely the lost art.
No, we'll fight that battle together, Roger. So, with that said, two things. One is it's interesting calling someone who wrote the book called Playing to Win not aggressive.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
That is really interesting, and I agree. I mean, the technocracy, it's there, and whomever we can get with us along that fight, and it's going to be a long-term thing, right? We're
Yes.
not going to change the world from one day to the other, but as long as we have this momentum, that's what I always refer to it,
Yes.
and that momentum is our side because we see the progress. I think we'll be fine.
I think that's right.
Roger, thank you so much for again giving us your time, your wisdom, your experience. It's an honor to host you, and I hope I'll get the chance to interview again on the new book. I'll get that book very soon, and then we'll talk.
That would be great. I would be delighted to do it again, Sohrab. These are always incredibly enjoyable conversations, and I like the notion of sort of an alliance between sort of the agile mentality and the playing to win mentality. Like that, we should make sure we utilize that rather than seeing them as somehow very different.
Absolutely. Next time we'll see each other in your course on strategy.
Absolutely,
So
that's
we'll
fantastic.
more
Yes.
shared understanding, and then we'll take it from there. And I
That
will
is great.
also
Yeah,
share
May I'm doing my
the
next
reason.
strategy course. My next strategy course.
Exactly.
So Rob is going to be in it, and I think there's still space in it. I can't promise that, but if you go look on Disco, is the provider's site, and you can be
We'll
in
share
class
the
with
link.
Rob. We'll share the link. Great, that's great.
We'll share the link. We'll make sure the link will get shared. All
Terrific.
right, Roger. Thank you. Have a good one.
Same to you. Thank you too.